a closer look at the entrance agreements for new Mountain West members.
Conference realignment is always in the news, so we're back on the Big Mountain to bring you an update.
Hey, welcome back to The Big Mountain. I am JY. This is my good friend Steve, and we want to talk about the entrance agreements for new members coming into the Mountain West here in just over a year, Steve. Time is ticking by. Really anxious to get these new members into the conference. Both UC Davis and NIU have made their agreements public through public record requests from various outlets. They of course have some redactions, as you would imagine. GCU, Grand Canyon, they're a private entity. You're not going to get their agreement. They don't have to release it. There's no such thing as public record laws for them, so we're not going to get that. But here recently, just last week, UTEP actually denied making theirs public, again, through a public records request. They claimed competitive disadvantage. So I do want to talk about UTEP first, kind of what was said here, and then we are going to dive into what we know for both the UC Davis agreement and the NIU agreement. So last week, Chris Murray with Nevada Sportsnet wrote an article regarding the public records request that he put forth, or at least Nevada Sportsnet put forth, for UTEP's entrance agreement with the Mountain West. A final ruling on this request came from the Texas Attorney General's office that stated UTEP did not need to release the membership contract. UTEP argued that the release of the contract could implicate the proprietary interest of the Mountain West Board of Directors. The AG's office determined that UTEP had demonstrated appropriate competitive issues and the contract could legally be withheld from release. So again, this isn't redacting certain pieces. This is just withholding the entire contract from the public records request. We can, likely get a feel for what was in this by reviewing the NIU and the UC Davis agreements. We're going to do that here in just a little bit. The redactions within those agreements are mainly regarding 3 or 4 main topics, one of them being the revenue share for the members, the amount that the conference is helping to cover exit fees of the conference that these members are going to be leaving, the amount of the entrance fee to the new member, and then also future budget increases. So let's first look at the UC Davis agreement here. It states that the Mountain West is going to cover an amount to help with them leaving the Big West Conference. You can't see that amount. That part is redacted, but clearly there is an amount going to help in those exit fees. It also states that the UC Davis will receive revenue distributions from the conference at a certain percentage of a full member. So of course, they're not going to get 100% that a full member with football is going to get. They'll get something probably significantly less than that, since football at this time is not going to be going over to the Mountain West, but staying in the Big West. They do then provide what the estimated revenue will be to UC Davis, again, estimated for year 1. And they also discuss the phase-in of basketball units. The agreement states that there is an entrance fee that will be paid in 6 installments to the Mountain West. Again, that is redacted. There's also a new member dues amount. That's a yearly dues amount that, again, is redacted. It talks about the grant of rights, and when they do become a member, they will have to sign and be bound by this new grant of rights from July 1st, 26 through June 30th of 32. And then 2 maybe of the more interesting nuggets here that are different than probably some others. One has to do with football. And we talked about this one in the past, but I want to bring it up again. And one has to do with basketball. So again, as we discussed here a few months ago when this first was made public, there is a portion of this agreement that's called First Consideration for Football Membership. This is a paragraph that says the Mountain West will contemplate elevating an FCS program to full membership, and when they do so, UC Davis will be given the first invite to apply. That took a lot of headlines going, wow, UC Davis is going to be first. you have to keep reading here because, okay, they're going to have an invite to apply, but it then goes on to say the conference is under no obligation to elevate UC Davis to full membership. So whenever the Mountain West determines that it would like to elevate 1, 2, 3 FCS schools, they will first reach out to UC Davis to see if the time is right for them. If it is, UC Davis can apply, and if it's not, well, they're just going to go get invites from other schools, and they'll pick, again, under no obligation to pick UC Davis. They'll pick whomever at that point that they so choose. Also, there's a portion here in terms of basketball budgets. While the amounts are redacted, it's clear here that the Mountain West is requiring increases to annual men's basketball budgets from 26, 27, and then the 2 subsequent years after that. So the Mountain West is requesting and requiring that UC Davis increases their budget. We have no idea how much that is. I don't know what their budget is today, and you can't see what it's redacted. Yeah. But they clearly they are requesting and requiring that these budgets increase. And we're going to be talking about that, Steve, on Thursday. Interview with A.D. DeLuca here with UC Davis. We talk about both of these options. We talk about the football piece and this first consideration. We also talk about budgets and things like that. Anything there with UC Davis that maybe stands out to you?
Well, there's a couple things from all the way back to the beginning.
Well, let's go all the way back.
Okay.
And then I'll get into some NIU stuff.
So first of all, big picture thoughts on everything.
Yep.
I have an opinion on what has happened, and then maybe a separate opinion on how I think it's good or bad for these programs. So first of all, I think the denying the Freedom of Information request and even the redactions, I think are not, in general, not a good idea when you're talking about transparency. We've seen lawsuits, with the PAC and with Florida State and all of that stuff. These are public entities. In my opinion, the information, all this should be public information, should not have been denied, should not be redacted because they're public universities. Now, but here's the problem is they operate in a world of competitive sports, right, and all of the conferences are doing this. Yeah. I don't think it's a good idea for any conference to do it, and I wish they would all stop specifically for public universities. But we're in a world where the Mountain West is competing with with other conferences to acquire schools. Mm-hmm. So I see why they're wanting to do this, and though we don't have the numbers because they're redacted, it sounds like the Mountain West is doing a good job in, they're bringing these schools up, but they're doing it with stipulations. They're bringing them in, and they want to bring them up, which it only helps them bring them up to that level of Mountain West to their competitors. Right. So I think overall in the long term, it'll be good for the school and it'll be good for the Mountain West. Sure. There's really nothing in these that has surprised me. Again, I think it's good business. It's good policy what they're doing here. And it makes a lot of sense, especially from, we see where one conference is trying to outbid, they're trying to steal other teams. Right. The Mountain West has done a good job, specifically, I'll say, with UNLV, keeping them in the fold. And as they try and add other conferences, I can definitely see why they're trying to protect their schools and they're trying to do this. So, and for UC Davis, we just spoke with their athletic director. We're going to have that interview for our dwellers here soon. And it sounds like, all of these things the Mountain West is requiring of them, those are on track. They're already on track with that. Those are their goals. So I think it aligns really well.
Well, and I get what you're saying from a global standpoint in terms of, these should be made public with little to no redactions. Yeah. I get that. Where you're coming from the public piece to that. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I totally understand why there are redactions, as you do. You get why there are. Everybody's doing it. I actually will say, I feel like we've gotten more from the Mountain West. I mean, look at the grant of rights. We got the whole grant of rights at this point. Now, it's not tied yet to the media agreement, right? But, I mean, it took a while to get grant of rights for different conferences and things like that. So I do feel that they are at least putting their best foot forward here to try and make public what they can. Of course, they're going to say, any conference is going to say, there's proprietary information, especially, I will say, being the Mountain West guy, on the western side of the country, where there's another conference trying to fill their membership. I mean, if there's not another threat to membership, like there is between the Pac and the Mountain West right now, I don't know where there would be. Like you can look at the ACC, but it's nothing like what's going on out west. So I think there are extenuating circumstances. I get what you're saying, but at the same time, they're going to try to take whatever precautions legally that they can.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. I understand it. Don't like it. I understand.
I understand.
Yeah. I do want to point out with the UC Davis and how you said there were, made headlines that they would get the kind of the right of first refusal, so to speak, or first consideration for FCS football, and to go up to FBS. Now, as you said, there's no obligation, but I do think it's significant. UC Davis Mountain West made the move first to get UC Davis.
Yes.
We've talked about other FCS schools. We've talked about Sacramento State. Mm-hmm. We've talked about Tarleton State.
Right.
We've talked about the Dakota schools.
Right.
And I think, everything from the fact that they already got the invite to they have right of first consideration has to lead you to believe that they are kind of at the front of the line, so to speak. They could get jumped.
Sure.
But for right now, they're at the front of the line if the Mountain West is going to elevate an FCS program. Now, there are certain aspects of North Dakota State, especially, I think, that could, if they were to get an invite and come over, maybe they could jump them.
Right.
But I do think there is some significance. They're in prime position right now that if they do get to the point where they get their facilities up to par and they feel like their football program is ready to compete at the FBS level, they're standing at the front of the line, which is not a bad place to be.
I agree with you. I think if they're not at the front, they're certainly in the probably top 3 or 4, right? I mean, they're definitely a target of the Mountain West, an FCS school that's been targeted by the Mountain West for full membership. I think we heard from Gloria Nevarez, the timing is not right yet for the Mountain West to do that. If you missed our conversation with Commissioner Nevarez, go back and give that a listen. She talks about this. And the timing may not be right for UC Davis right now. So this is kind of a win-win for both the conference and UC Davis because they're just not quite there yet, even though at some point they kind of not kind of like each other, they do like each other. Yeah. And at some point the timing probably will be right. But yeah, I agree with you. Whether they're number 1 on the list or they're clearly at the top, and I think the Mountain West knew they had to jump on UC Davis. I think there's a ton of value there with UC Davis, and that's why this was kind of, again, a win-win. We talked about that with NIU. I think you have the same situation here with UC Davis. I want to talk about NIU here just a little bit more. Of course, their agreement, very similar to what the agreement is here with UC Davis, with just a few differences. Of course, they're going to be football only, so it doesn't get into the basketball units and things like that. But so football only here in 2026. The one difference is that talks about in the very beginning, there was an incentive payment made to NIU to make this move. So the Mountain West shelled out, not just, covering exit fees and all that kind of stuff. There was an incentive payment to have NIU join. And so that's definitely a different piece. And again, redacted, you have no idea how much that was paid. It also states here with the NIU agreement that the media revenue will be phased in over the first 2 years to get them up to whatever membership percentage they're going to be at. Like the UC Davis agreement for basketball here, the NIU agreement has a football budget minimum. So we talked about that basketball budget minimum. For UC Davis, there's the same type of deal for 26-27 and 27-28 for NIU's football program. And it's going to be increasing existing funding for the football program. And again, you mentioned a win-win, and I think it's a win-win. We're elevating both the conference and their programming there at the same time. So, yep.
I totally agree. And basically what I'm going to say, it's the, I don't want to say opposite. It's the mirror image of what's going on with UC Davis. They're coming in for football only. They got a payment up front, which I think is great because the Mountain West was able to lock down, a great target in that Chicagoland market, get into the central time zone. So pay some money up front, lock that down. But also, secure their financial commitments and having a minimum level of football budget going forward, like we saw with Davis with basketball.
Yep.
I think that's fantastic. I think you're going to see more and more conferences do this. Maybe you don't need it at the Big Ten SEC level, but all these conferences who are fighting to like survive and be viable going forward, I think you're going to see this more and more for those two revenue sports, basketball and football. It makes total sense, and it makes sure that everyone is investing in their programs, which is an investment in the conference, instead of having freeloaders.
Sure.
And so then that doesn't. So then you're ensuring you don't have a situation where there's resentment, where certain members are like, "Hey, we're spending this amount of money. These people are freeloading on us," which that causes problems in the conferences, as we've seen.
Yeah, and remember to bring this full circle to kind of the new news about the UTEP agreement. UTEP was the first full member to join the Mountain West shortly after they were looking for members. They were the first one to come out and publicly accept the invitation to the Mountain West. And that really solidified the conference. They had Hawaii still as that football member. They ended up bringing them as a full, and that's where they got their 8 from. So, I think whether it was going to be redactions or just fully, obviously the AG of Texas said, yeah, you don't have to even give it. Who knows what was in there? And, I'll speculate. Maybe there was some sort of incentive payment. Maybe there was, the entrance fee was lower, which would have been redacted anyway. But remember, they were the first school to be added, full member to be added at a time. And we heard Commissioner Navarez say this, they felt like they were going to be okay, but until they got that MOU signed and now the grant of rights and they have members joining, there was uncertainty there for members. So, just a lot of things going on there. I don't want to speculate too much on that. Of course, people are going to read into that what they will. And the AG of Texas just said, nope, you don't have to give it. And, they're not going to give it. I think you get a pretty good flavor looking at UC Davis and NIU, what is probably in the UTEP agreement as well. So anyway, wanted to do an update on that. I know we talked about a few of these items here in the past, but with the new news about the UTEP agreement, wanted to bring that full circle. So, hey, as a reminder, again, we have AD DeLuca with UC Davis joining us on Thursday for an interview. Get to know the Aggies Mountain West fans because they are joining us in 2026. With that, hey, we thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like this episode. Subscribe if you like our content. And we'll see you next time on the Big Mountain.